Hi everyone, Dr. Dashke here, and I'm going to talk to you about one of the most important figures whose work helps other scholars understand how and why insiders experience the sacred and profane in religious settings. Emile Durkheim is a French sociologist very significant in illustrating how exactly the categories of the sacred and profane are both created by society and in turn help define how institutions and individuals should function within society. For this reason, Durkheim is considered a founder of the functionalist school of sociology. His definition says, religion is a unified system of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things, that is to say, things set apart and forbidden, beliefs and practices which unite into one single moral community called a church, all those who adhere to them. In Durkheim's description, the sacred must be protected from the profane or it will no longer be sacred. In other words, they cannot be brought into contact with each other unless done in the proper way, or they will turn the one into the other, destroying it. In a sense, they are understood to be contagious and will contaminate each other. If the sacred is improperly brought into the profane realm, this becomes an act of sacrilege or desecration, which literally means to make unsacred. We might think of anti-Semitic attacks against the Jews that specifically target sacred sites or objects for desecration, for example by destroying Torah scrolls in synagogues or spray painting swastikas on the gravestones in Jewish cemeteries. Thus these things become no longer sacred, but the opposite, desecrated, which in fact is not profane, which is a neutral state, but worse, unsacred, which I will describe in another video as taboo. A more secular example would be how many Americans feel about attacks against symbols of the country, such as burning the American flag, which feels sacred to them, set apart from other ordinary objects, and therefore certain ways of treating it must be forbidden. The human social mechanism, we might even say technology, for moving things properly from profane to sacred, and sometimes vice versa, is ritual. Ritual is a process that changes the cosmic nature of an object. To enter the sacred realm in this way is to transcend the line between profane and sacred. Humans can transcend in this way too by entering sacred space or altering their consciousness. When they do, they experience transcendence. In rituals, often a profane object needs to be made available to the sacred. Therefore, it first needs to go through another ritual called consecration, which literally means with the sacred. Making with the sacred is the opposite of desecration. Consecration changes the nature or status of an object from profane to sacred. Thus, it is when the sacred comes into contact with the profane world, or for profane or taboo reasons, it is done without ritual, without consecration, or as we sometimes say, unceremoniously. In fact, to go back to my earlier example, the proper way of disposing a flag requires the remains of the flag to be burned. In this context, the action is a proper ritual. In another context, like protest, it's a taboo act of sacrilege. In this next example, Exodus 19, or the giving of the law to Moses at Sinai, you'll see examples of setting apart and forbidding actions and ritual consecration to make a sacred space, that is, a space in the profane world that is separated out paradoxically to be sacred within the boundaries of the limits ritually constructed around it. Sometimes sacred spaces are natural features, like mountains or bodies of water, and sometimes they are human constructions, like temples and churches. The example of Moses at Mount Sinai is one of the most famous sacred spaces in world religion. Consecrating this sacred space prepares it for the receipt of the revelation of God's law, the Ten Commandments from God to humans, heaven to earth. The Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and be ready by the third day, because on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all people. Put limits for the people around the mountain and tell them, be careful that you do not approach the mountain or touch the foot of it. Whoever touches the mountain is to be put to death. They are to be stoned or shot with arrows. Not a hand is to be laid on them. No person or animal shall be permitted to live. Only when the ram's horn sounds a long blast may they approach the mountain. After Moses had gone down the mountain to the people, he consecrated them, and they washed their clothes. Then he said to the people, "Prepare yourselves for the third day. Abstain from sexual relations." Moses said to the Lord, "The people cannot come up Mount Sinai because you yourself warned us. Put limits around the mountain and set it apart as holy." Durkheim, as it happens, comes from a long line of rabbis in his Jewish family, so it's not surprising that the way he describes the sacred and profane looks very much like the way it's presented in the Hebrew scriptures. We see here examples of consecration, a ritual by which somebody is changed from an ordinary state of being to another different state. Very often consecration will have to do with some sort of changing of clothes. Here we have the washing of clothes. You'll notice that the people are told to put limits around and be careful not to approach the mountain. They will get themselves killed if they do. They are told that they need to abstain from sexual relations. These are all ways of forbidding ordinary behavior in preparation for the revelation at Sinai, and thus creating a new way of experiencing the world collectively with the other participants in the ritual. And just in case you didn't get it, God literally comes out and tells them, "Put limits around the mountain and set it apart to be holy." You can see sacred space created and maintained in another example. This is the Baha'i temple outside of Chicago. Last time I was there was this sign before you enter the sanctuary that says, "Help keep this a sacred space," with icons prohibiting photography and talking. Thus, the space is set apart and kept sacred by making certain actions forbidden. These are a few thoughts on what's important about how Emile Durkheim describes how the sacred and profane are created by and function in society. Notably, this religious function works exactly the same way for secular society as when it comes to nationalistic symbols, something Durkheim himself noted in 1915 with the publication of the Elementary Forms of Religious Life. I'll have more to say about Durkheim in another video where I'll talk about religion and society. Until next time!